So Ivan Pavlov, Russian research scientist, and what he would do, he'd feed these dogs, and then he'd ring a bell, or ring a tuning fork, depending on which story you read. Ring a bell, feed the dogs. Ring a bell, feed the dogs. Ring a bell, feed the dogs. Eventually, that bell gets rung, and the dogs salivate like they're about to be fed. So even though food had nothing to do with the bell, the two become linked in the mind. Now, why that's important for human beings is that's exactly what we're doing with our fears and our phobias. An event happens in the past, and if it's strong enough, it could just be a one-time event. Sometimes it's over a period of time, i.e. you get bitten by a dog. Let's use that example. In that moment, you can love dogs, love dogs, love dogs. You get bitten by the dog, the brain goes, this equals danger, avoid. Now that's quite a literal one, but it can also be abstract. So it could be if you're a small child, and let's say you banged your head, and then you open your eyes and all you see is that orange. To the child that doesn't have the cognitive understanding, it might go, oranges equal pain. And then later on, 20, 30 years later, the person comes to see me with a phobia of oranges. I'm going, well, that's a bit weird. But it's because they've created these subconscious links. Make sense? Now, what happens once we have these links, our survival mechanism, our fight, flight, or freeze, which is designed to protect us, it's designed to save us from these saber-toothed tigers, from danger, is then every time we see that thing again in future, we fire off this emotional response. And so we either run, so we flee, or we fight. Often in this case we get angry, or want to punch something, or we freeze. We get glued to the floor. Now with things like claustrophobia, this is kind of cyclical. Because something like claustrophobia, what happens is you have that fear response, and your mind goes, I want to run. You've got the adrenaline to run, but you've got nowhere to go because you're trapped either literally, i.e. in a lift, or metaphorically, oh, I can't get up because everyone will look at me. You know, I can't leave this presentation. I can't leave this assembly. It's often things when people are young. And so what causes that, and I won't get into too much into the neuroscience in the time we have, but it's what's called the amygdala, which tells us to respond to danger. So there are numerous ways we can work through this. There are many techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy to mindfulness to neurolinguistics programming to hypnotherapy to EMDR, havening, timeline, and they all do a slightly different thing. Now, what I found works best for phobias is to do a combination of all of them. With a straightforward phobia, as I said, it's normally a specific event that happened that created your fear. When it's general anxiety, it's actually more systemic, so it's more a prolonged feeling of unsafe. And rather than being dogs equal, planes equal, lifts equal, it's the world equals. So the world is an unsafe place. So if you were under a prolonged period of stress, so let's say you were bullied at school, you moved around a lot as a child, you had anxious parents, you had distant parents, or any of those things, or you got stressed at work over a long period of time, you live in that constant stress, and then your fight, flight, or freeze becomes turned up so much that you see everything as potential danger. So rather than being in a very specific context, it's more about the world. And so one of the things to realize, and we'll come on to this in a minute, one of the things to realize that with anxiety, if you've tried some of these rapid change techniques such as hypnotherapy and EMDR and it hasn't worked, it's normally because subconsciously the mind feels you're not safe. And if the subconscious feels you're not safe, it's going to keep running this pattern till it's found other ways.